Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we are going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to continue talking about Vecna, Eve of Ruin. We're going to jump into Chapter 4. So let's jump into the start of Chapter 4, and our player characters now possess 2 of the 7 pieces of the Rod of the 2 pieces of the Rod of 7 pieces. Okay. And at this point, they return to Sigil Sanctum, Illustrial's Sigil Sanctum, and there they learn that the next piece of the Rod of 7 pieces is on Eberron, and it is in the Mournlands. The Mournlands is a magical wasteland on Eberron, and that magical wasteland came from an unbelievably horrible battle that occurred there in Cyre, C-I-R-E, Cyre. Okay, so the player characters realize that they need to go and get the Rod of 7, the 3rd piece of the Rod of 7 pieces. They go through the portal to Corvair. Okay, so they're going to Corvair, which is a continent on Eberron, and they are specifically taken right into the Mournlands. When they get into the Mournlands, they encounter 3 different groups. First, they encounter, and actually, you know what? I'll just tell you the groups they encounter. I'm not even going to get into the order they encounter them. They encounter Mercy, who is the leader of the Warforged Pilgrims. So these Warforged Pilgrims, the Warforged were created specifically to do battle in the Mournlands, right? So they have a right to the ruins that are, to the lost treasures, to the magic items, to the treasure that still exists within this magical wasteland. They have a right to it, right? And they are there, and these Warforged Pilgrims are traveling back, and they are getting what are called docents. Docents are powerful magical foci, right, that can only be attuned by a Warforged. It goes into their eye socket, or it goes into the place where their heart would be. It goes into a cavity within a Warforged, and it can go in different areas, right? But it needs to be put inside the body of a Warforged, and Warforged can do this because they're constructs, right? You and I, if we pull our eyeball out, that's going to be a big deal for us, right? But for Warforged, it's not, right? They have a different, they're literally constructed, no pun intended, differently. They're constructs, right? So very, very interesting, okay? So basically these Warforged are going into the Mournland, and they're getting these magical items called docents. These magical items are sacred to them, okay? Now, also encountered in the magical wasteland that is the Mournland are the Cyran veterans, and the Cyran veterans are led by Kalith. Kalith is an orc soldier, and she served in the Cyran in the Cyran War, right? Probably certainly fought against Warforged, right? And she has a collection of other soldiers, right? And these soldiers are in the Mournlands, and they are there because all of them, were damaged in different ways in the war, and at this point they actually need wealth, right? So many of them have lost their families, they've lost their homes. They came out of the Cyran War with wounds, with mental scarring, and they need wealth in order to set things right, so they're not just scrabbling for nothing, right? And so they have this very distinct serious need, right? And so they are specifically looking for wealth in the Mournland, and they believe that they have a very distinct right to the treasures that are in the Mournland because they fought there, right? And that the wealth that is there, the treasure is there, the remaining magic items that are there, the docents that are there, are all theirs and can help them restore wealth to their lives so that they don't live like paupers, right? So right out of the gate, Warforged against Cyran veterans, right? And who's in the middle? The Dragon Master characters are right in the middle of this, right? And so with their player character sheets, you know, and these powerful heroes, they're in position to get in the middle of this and choose a winner and a loser, right? Or perhaps they can find a peaceful solution where both parties are appeased, right? But then there's a third group that's in the Mournland that they encounter in the Mournland, and that is the Blades. Now the Blades are evil Warforged who serve the Lord of Blades, and specifically are under the Lord of Blades lieutenant, which is Glaive. And Glaive is a very powerful, very dangerous Warforged who is stalking through the Mournlands. And this group of Blades, these evil Warforged who serve the Lord of Blades, they are specifically there to find one of the colossi that were used in the Sire Wars, these huge war machines, like gigantic mechs, like literally the size of like Voltron, right? And they want to find a colossi that they can use as an outpost in the Mournland, as they do the same thing that the Warforged Pilgrims are doing, and the same thing that the Cyran veterans are doing for different reasons. Getting the docents, getting the magic items, getting the treasure, getting the goods out of this magical wasteland, right? So 3 different groups. One seeking treasure for nothing more than treasure's sake, and that's the Blades. The Cyran veterans seeking treasure to restore their lives, which were ruined in this war, right? And then finally, the Warforged Pilgrims, who are seeking specifically docents, which are incredibly valuable, to be used as sacred relics, right? And are seeking these to position them for worship, which is quite interesting. So all of this is in place, right? And the player characters go into the Mournlands and encounter all 3 of these groups, right? And that's the setup. That's the conflict, right? And then we'll talk more in a future video about how the player characters actually dive into this and engage with it. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion on the coolest parts of Chapter 4 of Vecna, Eve of Ruin. The important part is when I get to hear what you think about Vecna, Eve of Ruin. Hit me up down below. Please consider subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.